everybody. It's Dr. Eric Balcavage, and we're back for another edition of Thyroid Answers Podcast. With me is Dr. Erica Riggleman, my partner in crime for the Thyroid Answers Podcast, and we have a special guest today. I would consider this guest a friend, a mentor, and an expert in many things that go along with the physiology of the body, and it is my good friend, Dr. Ben Lynch. Dr. Ben Lynch, it's great to have you on the podcast. How are you today? And from sunny Seattle.
Yeah, I'm even blocking out the sun with my big head. I'm trying.
Most people are going to think that's like, you have this holy presence. That's why it's glowing behind your head. But really, that's the one day of sunshine in Seattle, right?
Right. Well, we did time it to make sure the sun is right at my head level when we start. So well done.
Right. And that's a big head. It's like Sputnik, right?
Woo!
So we got you on the podcast. We want to talk to you. And one of the most important things we're going to discuss is the new book that you have out called Dirty Genes. I got my copy right here. We just had the Dirty Genes Summit. And so congratulations on getting the book done. It's not an easy task. I know I'm still working on trying to get my own done, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about Dirty Genes? What led you to write this book?
Well, first I have to make a correction. The real author is Theo.
Theo Lynch.
So I have to go out in public with that. So now I got off my chest. So yeah, Theo.
Here's what's funny. When you were getting ready, I'm like, the kids must be at school, because otherwise we'd have Theo in the background adding commentary to make sure his dad stayed on task or let us know stuff. And Theo somehow still got into the podcast.
He still did, and he actually made me late a bit to the podcast because he lost his study guide for his geometry test today. So we found it, though. We found it.
The dog ate it.
Yeah, it was right where it should have been. Amazing. So, yeah. So back on task. Dirty Genes is a book that describes how your body functions and what can lead to causing dysfunction. I mean, we go through life thinking that if we have acid reflux, that we take an antacid, or if we get sick, we take an antibiotic, even if it's a flu or a viral infection, right? Or we have depression, we take an antidepressant. Well, our body is having these symptoms for a reason, and these symptoms just don't appear to try to make us sick. It's not like our genes say, I'm going to get you. It's all about that your genes have jobs to do, and they require tools in order to do that. And if they don't have the tools, you get symptoms. Mm-hmm. So Dirty Genes helps you understand which genes are really pretty critical for a lot of your main body systems, i.e. your brain neurotransmitters, your detoxification system, your cell membrane integrity, which is super important for your health, your digestion, and among other things, your cardiovascular system. So if you have weak points in these genes, as discussed in Dirty Genes, you will have symptoms in every one of these areas. And most of us do. Most of us have genes that are dirty that are described in the book. And a dirty gene is simply a gene that is not functioning at its best. For whatever reason. It could be a genetic mutation. It could be a lack of a vitamin. It could be too much of a vitamin. It could be an environmental chemical. It could be lack of sun. So, I mean, there's many reasons how a gene can get dirty, and I show you many of the ways how these top 7 genes get dirty, how to clean them up, and you don't need any testing. You don't need genetic testing involved. You just take quizzes, and you go through, and you're like, oh, wow, that one's pretty dirty, and then you take another one, it's like, wow, that one's actually pretty good. So, and the quiz questions are based upon how you're feeling, your symptoms, and it's pretty cool how it all worked out, and I have to give credit to my writer and my agent to provide kind of the structure of the book. I kind of was the brains behind the science, but I give them credit in how the program was built and the layout. I think they did a fantastic job, and it's very approachable.
I think that your book filled a big void that was in our functional medicine realm, is that there's lots of books out there that talk about genetics, but there's not one that encompasses everything. There's a lot of books saying, you have this gene, take this supplement, and they're trying to oversimplify it and not look at the big picture. And so I really, commend you for writing this book to be able to open people's eyes, to be able to say that there's more out there than just having this gene, and that there is a reason why this is happening.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, you're right. There's a ton of that. In fact, there was a Facebook post yesterday from a fellow doc, and she said, "Man, I'm at a seminar right now, and they're saying that you should never give methylfolate or methylcobalamin to someone who has MTHFR or COMT because it can cause irreversible mental illness." I was just like, okay. So yeah, the book also helps dispel many of the myths that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have this really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're on the same page with this. I think we have this tendency to look at blood chemistry as a marker, and it's either good or bad, right? We look at genes, if there's a SNP, it must be bad, right? And we try and simplify it to make it really easy, so we have this formulaic approach. Well, if you have MTHR SNP, you automatically give methylated folate, or you don't, right? Depending on which side of the fence. If you have this gene SNP, you have CBS, you need B6, right? So we try and make it formulaic. And I think when we do it, it's essentially what we're doing in conventional medicine, which is if you have high cholesterol, we got to lower it, right? And we play this physiologic whack-a-mole to try and keep knocking things around, when in reality, we really need to look back and say, okay, these are symptoms we have, or these are changes in our lab chemistries. And we need, instead of saying that's good or that's bad, we just have to look at it that it's a body's adaptation to stress, some type of a stress response. It's not wrong. It's just it's something we need to be aware of, and then ask the question, why is that happening? If you have MTHFR or any other genetic SNP, it's been there. It's been there the whole time. Why, when you're 42, does it seem like that it's an issue now? It's not the gene per se, right? It's everything else that's going around that. Something we talk about, which is epigenetics. And maybe you'll give a little explanation to the listeners, because some of them probably haven't read the book yet, about what epigenetics is and how that relates to their dirty genes.
Yeah, and I'll definitely hit that. And, it ties into your comment that, we all have MTHFR, and some of us have other genes that aren't working as well as maybe someone else's. They were born with a Ferrari, so they can go 0 to 60 in a few seconds. And others were born with a Volkswagen Bug, and these cars have different functions and abilities. So, knowing what car you drive by identifying your genes is actually pretty cool. Doesn't mean that a Volkswagen Bug is bad. You're not going to win a race from going 0 to 60. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So, epigenetics is merely the understanding that your genes take orders, and the epigenetics is what provides the orders. It's the stuff that's around your genes which provides instruction for them to turn on or off. And the cool thing, most of the epigenetics that the signals for epigenetics comes from comes from me, comes from us and the environment. So it's basically any type of environmental signal that comes in through any of our 5 senses, sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch. Any of those will trigger an epigenetic response, which will then signal the gene to do work or tell it to be quiet. So for example, the sun came up this morning here in Seattle, kind of. And as the sun came up, my eyes, were getting rays of the sun behind my eyelids, and it was suppressing melatonin production and increasing cortisol production. So in the evening, when it starts getting darker, as long as we don't have electronic devices in front of us, as the sun sets, our cortisol starts to wane and starts to go down. So all of these are just responses of the environment, and we are either acting appropriately within our own environment, or we're acting inappropriately, meaning there's 2 ways we can act. We can act in a way that is supportive of our genes and keeping them healthy and functioning, or we can act in a way that is providing more work and harming them and making them dirty. It's that simple.
So there's 2 words in when we talk about adaptability, right? And that's really kind of one of the things we're talking about is the stress load, right, that we put on the body. And if the stress load is something that we can maintain homeostasis, kind of that balance, then probably most of those gene SNPs don't really come into play because it's within a manageable amount of stress. But when we have excessive amounts of different stressors, this excessive amount of epigenetic input that pushes the buttons a little bit harder, then we move out of that homeostatic balance and we move into more of a allostatic load, right? And what we see are adaptations to that load to try and get us back or closer to a level of homeostasis for that level of stress, right?
Yeah, I think a great way to look at that would be, a simple like force, right? If your genes are working really hard on your behalf and you were born with a gene that can't work as hard because its shape is slightly altered, and so you have a slight weak link there. And if you're adding more force, it will not break, but it will cause further dysfunction. So for example, if you're playing with a balloon and your kids are batting balloons around the house and all of a sudden, it hits something and it pops, right? There's too much force that was done and the pop is a symptom. So, there's give in your genes, and they're malleable, and they will recruit other genes to help out when they get a little bit overwhelmed too. But if you keep pushing too much and putting too much work on your genes, that popping of the balloon is actually a symptom that you're experiencing in life. So the cool thing is you don't have to live a perfect life. All these books that are telling you, or the author is pretending to be some angel on high, or so that they live the perfect diet, the perfect environment. They eat always the best. They're always happy. They're always getting the right amount of exercise, the perfect sleep. No way. So dirty genes is a practical approach that's saying, hey, you're going to eat chips and you drink some soda at times. You're going to be staying up till 2 a.m. sometimes. You're going to be flying across the country, sucking down jet fuels and so on, and switching time zones and altering other things, and knowingly, do other things that are dirtying your genes. That's okay. As long as you don't do it more than 30% of the time, you bounce right back.
Right. And I say that in my patient. I know Erica and I have talked about this before. It really is about an 80-20 lifestyle. If 80% of the time you're doing a lot of the things right, then you should be able to have a little cushion, a little give to in that 20%, 30% range where you push the system a little bit, you get a little bit of extra stress on it, but the body's malleable, it's able to adapt. What most people start to become chronically sick, that what they perceive as 80-20 is really maybe flipped. When you start to look at their health, their history, their lifestyle, the things they're doing, they're really, from a healthy perspective, those things you really start to notice that those are in the 20%, and their norm is probably the damaging side is probably closer to that 70-80%, and that's leading to a lot of those issues.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they put so much pressure on themselves to try to be perfect because they read in those books or they see on blogs that they want to get their health back so bad. So they're trying so hard to do it. And then if they mess up even just ever so slightly, they beat themselves up because they felt like they messed it all up and they can't come back from it. And, that pressure and that stress on themselves only makes them more sicker. And so it becomes that kind of vicious cycle. And so it's making people realize that you're never going to be perfect. Your body's never going to be perfect, but you've got to work on the things that you can work on. And epigenetics, the stuff that affects you environmentally, are definitely things you have control over. You have control over the environment. Sometimes in your house, the foods that you put in your mouth, the skin products that you put on your skin. Those are things that you have control over, and that's what you want to work on the most.
For sure.
So Ben, you had a lot of gene polymorphisms to pick from for this book, right? You came up with the Super 7, right? Why did you pick those?
Yeah, so when I was having my first phone calls with the publisher, they're like, you got to pick 7 genes. I was like, well, why 7? I was like, well, it's just a good number. And I was like, and it's manageable and it's not overwhelming. And it's like, okay, that's valid. And I said, okay, there's 19,000 genes in the human body. How do I pick 7? And so basically it comes down to, it's very simple. Actually, as I got overwhelmed myself. I said, okay, well, they have to have a ton of research. They have to be genes discussed in the National Library of Medicine heavily, not just one or two papers, but heavily. So that eliminated a lot of other genes, so gone. So I narrowed that list down. Then it had to be a gene that had to be malleable to our actions. So if we ate too much protein, it would actually support or hinder, or if we were stressed out, or if we had chemical exposures, or what have you. So we had to be able to manipulate it with our actions, how it's functioning. So that was another requirement. Another requirement was that you didn't need genetic testing done. You didn't need to have specialty testing done. You could figure it out by using questions and taking a quiz. And that ruled out a lot of them from that alone. So, because when you know, Eric, and yourself as well, when you have a patient come in, you automatically know what genes are dirty. I mean, you've been doing this for so long. You're like, oh, all right, we got a slow COMT here. We got a MTHFR. It's kind of not right. Maybe a slow MAO-A, dirty histamine gene. So that was another big one. And then another one was I had to have enough experience with it. I had to be able to, help the person, help the reader, and be confident that my recommendations would work. And so, having done this for as long as I have, I know that the genes that I pick for dirty genes, I can help those genes specifically. And then the last one was, all right, well, this changed through the book. So I picked I still had 20 to choose from, or 30 or 40 to choose from at this point. And then I narrowed it down as I was writing the book. I was like, because I was writing like some of the systems of the program, and I realized like, oh, I don't have a gut gene. I don't have a cardiovascular gene. So I was like, I got to hit all the major body systems. So I was like, okay, neurotransmission, cell membranes are pretty darn important.
Right.
And bile flow and pregnancy and cardiovascular. So that's how I also hit it. So basically there's only 7 genes, really 8 discussed in the book. But when you go through the soak and scrub, you clean them all up. And you clean up all your genes in the body because it's covering every system. And when you do the spot cleaning, you're also cleaning up more than the Super 7. So you're focusing on 7, but in reality is we're hitting the entire system. So, but it boils it down and reduces it. It's reductionist at the same time. It's making it broad. So it was a real tough balance to be able to do this, because there was many times where I was like, I can't do this. This book is not possible. And there's like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. And so they just kept hitting me. It's like, go get it done. And so thanks to them, I persevered and kept going through. And at the end, I was super happy with it.
So there's a big tie, like when Erica and I talk about it a lot, and I talk about this all the time, and that is, from a thyroid perspective, is that what happens in thyroid physiology is not so much about the gland, even the central regulatory physiology, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid, but really what's happening at the cellular level. And when you look at a book like this, and maybe some of our listeners are saying, how does this book relate to me? I got a thyroid problem. And I think there's a parallel here, because when Dr. Lynch is talking about it, I'm going to let him kind of explain what it is, but I'm going to give a little bit of direction. And that is, when we're talking about thyroid physiology, we're talking about the stressors on the cell that change the physiology of thyroid hormone in the cell. It changes the deiodinase activity within the cell. And we talk about many times that the pituitary gland acts differently than the peripheral tissues, and that TSH is really only a valid marker during homeostasis for gland disease. Any other time, especially when there's stress load or allostasis, is excessive amounts of stress, which most of our patients are under, because they're not coming to us sick, tired, fatigued, and having constipation and all these issues, hair falling out, when they are in homeostasis and feeling well. They are under these stress experiences. But there's a unique tie-in here. When you're talking about the soak and scrub the genes, how does that play a role in helping somebody who's got hypothyroid symptoms, where they've been diagnosed as with a glandular disease or they're just resulting in what we call cellular hypothyroidism? What's the connection there? Why would this book and following the soak and scrub method overall help somebody who's got chronic hypothyroid symptoms?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you brought that up because, the thyroid is, people think when they have a glandular problem or a specific symptom, a skin problem or a sinus problem, that's what they target. You spray the decongestion up your nose, or you take an antihistamine, that will solve it. Or, if you have weird coatings on your tongue, you scrape it off. Or, you have eczema or psoriasis and you put a topical steroid. Or you have thyroid dysfunction, you take thyroid meds. So, but that's not how the body works. I mean, the thyroid is kind of the gas pedal of the body, right? And it will sense how it needs to modulate your system. And if your system is sick, it might slow down for various reasons. And if it's also sick, it might speed up for various reasons. So it's not doing it on purpose. I mean, it is doing it on purpose. It will alter its function based upon how it best serves you, but not always. Sometimes your thyroid gland is trying to do its job, but it can't because you're sucking down bromide in your sodas, or you're in swimming pools or hot tubs with bromide and chloride, and then you're drinking fluoridated water, and then the iodide, which is not prevalent in your diet, the iodine can't bind to your thyroid because it's stuck with these other halogens. So if you clean up and filter your water, and you filter your air, and you reduce the soda and the input of these chemicals, then even that low amount of iodine that you've been consuming still can now bind to your thyroid and actually start working. So that is one. And another one is Eric, you and I talk about this all the time, is the cell danger response. And the mitochondria are super important for our health, and they sense if there's danger in the body. They sense if there's heavy metals. They sense if there's infection. They sense if there's chemicals, and they can't work as well. So what happens is the mitochondria will shift from burning oxygen and turn it into fuel and give you energy, to saying, we can't really do that right now because we're getting too dirty. And the gene GST-GPX is discussed in Dirty Genes, the glutathione gene. If you're low glutathione, your mitochondria are hurting. And if your mitochondria are hurting, your thyroid's hurting. Hands down. And then, Eric, in terms of, and Erica, if what causes the hypothyroidism? It's like the chicken or the egg. And commonly you see your patients super stressed out, which then depletes them of various nutrients, and that stress causes the hypothyroid issues. So there's genes which predispose us to stress, and that stress could be physical stress, it could be mental stress, it could be not repairing stress, and it could be not falling asleep on time or deeply enough. So the genes, as discussed in Dirty Genes, hit a lot of these multiple targets. And if you have gut issues, then those gut issues are going to cause leaky gut membranes, and then the food's going to escape. And if you're eating gluten or other foods that have similar structure to your thyroid, your immune system is going to start attacking your thyroid from your gut, from the foods that you're eating. So you got to heal your gut, which is the DAO gene. But you can also get gut issues from being stressed out, which is the slow COMT gene. So it's a very holistic book. It's a very holistic approach, and it explains a lot of things in ways that I believe have never been explained before. And it allows the reader to be super excited, super empowered, and be able to take the appropriate action versus, like you said earlier, whack-a-mole, or as you said earlier, Erica, about just being overwhelmed and scared. So it diffuses all of that.
Yeah, the first time I ever heard you talk about the cell danger response quite a few years ago, it like really hit home. And I was like, wow, that really makes sense, because at the heart of any problem in the body, there's something that your body senses that there's a danger, and there is a response. And, in our society, we don't really want to ask the why. We just want to fix it. And so, when you take a step back and are looking at, is it a chronic infection? Because I know with a lot of my patients who have thyroid issues, there's Lyme disease, there's Epstein-Barr, there's heavy metals, they're not detoxing. And there are genes that affect all of those things that can predispose you to not being able to overcome those. And so definitely when I first heard the cell danger response, it clicked with me, and it really made sense and in relations to any sort of chronic health problem somebody could have. Yeah,
for sure. It's huge. And, as you both know, Dr. Robert Navio is the genius behind the cell danger response. And it's a phenomenal paper. It's mind blowing. It's paradigm shifting, right? It's awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the key things too is that when we're talking about stress, right, and the stress load and how that impacts the genetics, that same stressors that dirty up our genes are the same stressors that may make that cell or trigger that cell danger response. And from a thyroid physiology standpoint, hypothyroid symptoms are the result of what's happening at the cell, regardless of what's happening at the gland, right? So as you said, when there's a stress response, part of that stress response is to downregulate cell metabolism to protect it. And so phase one of any type of, thyroid condition, really, if 80-90% of the cases of hypothyroidism, primary hypothyroidism, are considered autoimmune, but really hypothyroid symptoms start regardless of what's happening at the cellular level. And then that autoimmune issue, which you see right now is real, especially in the functional medicine world, we look at the autoimmune condition as the primary issue. And even the autoimmune process isn't the primary issue. You got to get back to the stressors that drive it.
Right.
The thyroid gland is just unique in its ability to sense those things from that cell danger response, those DAMPs and PAMPs. The thyroid gland is uniquely set up to be able to sense those things and react to those things. So I look at that autoimmune condition in many cases not as the mistake, just like the genes aren't a mistake, right? Or the SNPs aren't a mistake. That's the body adapting. If I have a stress response and I can't, and my thyroid gland is continuing to pump out lots of thyroid hormone, and my cells are working hard to try and deactivate that stuff. What's the next logical thing to do is get rid of the gland that creates the problem to begin with. Unfortunately, in our model, we just say, well, we'll just give more T4. We'll just whack-a-mole it back into range, and we assume that works. And I think we see that same kind of parallel in some of the genetic models of some people do. They just say, hey, if you got a bad gene, just give more cofactor.
Right.
Everything just needs more cofactors. Like that's all that is the problem. And instead, I think you and I have talked about it, and that's part of, I think, what led to the book, but that was part of what led to the pathway planners and the strategy report that you came up with, is that, hey, it's not about just pile more stuff into the system. The body is trying to divert things. Dr. Navio did a great explanation of that in his paper and saying, hey, when you have stress response, tryptophan goes in this direction versus this direction. It makes a neurotoxin versus serotonin that makes you feel good. Is that a mistake? No, it's not a mistake. It's a beautiful adaptation to the stress response.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's so cool. When you realize, I really hope folks hear that symptoms aren't bad, right? Symptoms aren't bad. Lab values aren't bad. All symptoms are is your genes trying to thump you and say, yo, help me out here. Help me out. Don't force me down. If you have a histamine reaction, your body is responding to a food you ate, a drink that you ate, an environment, that you sniffed, up your nose, and your immune system's a bit hyper right now, and you got to calm that down. So, and that can be happening from pure stress. So again, you hear that term stress, it's like, oh God, here we go. It's going to be a book telling me to calm down. Well, yeah, it is telling you that, but it's telling you that at a biochemical level as to why you need to calm down and what happens when you're stressed biochemically, physiologically, and genetically, what can result in that, step by step. So it's pretty cool that way. And I think folks also need to understand that, they are really in control of their genes, and genes do respond to their environment. I used this example the other day, and I really liked it in terms of, you go back to ancient history, and you coming over the hill on your horse, and you come over and you see this beautiful castle in the distance, and you see all the peasants out there farming. You see the kids playing. Someone's tending to the horses and trimming their hooves, and the knights just hanging out and drinking wine, and the jester's entertaining the king, and the king's just a big glutton consuming a bunch of food. Everything's hunky-dory, right? That's all good. And then they keep seeing you coming closer and closer, and you decided to wear black and look kind of scary, and all the peasants freak out. They all run inside the castle. The king, gets up and knocks the table over, and the knights stop doing their thing, and they're all up there, and the arrow shooters come out, and they're all ready to go, right? And the drawbridge closes. Bam. Your genes are the same thing. So when you are in a rebuild state, when you're sleeping deeply, it's like the knights are partying, and everything's good, and everything's building, the peasants are growing the food, everything's awesome. But as soon as a stressor is triggered, the jobs change. The jobs change. The genes that you want working stop working, and the genes that you don't want working start working. And you did that, or the environment did that to your genes. So get out of the environment, which causes your genes to respond in this manner, and get in an environment which allows them to respond more favorably. It's that simple.
Right. And I think you tie into that too. The genes, you've got different pathways that things go down. You put different stressors on genes as a result of those stressors. That makes them work harder, and maybe they don't have the efficiency to do that.
Right.
The other part of that is all those cofactors, those vitamins and those nutrients that you think you need to make a specific gene work also get diverted down different pathways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody says to you, Dr. Lynch, I've got MTHFR and I've got CBS, how much methylfolate and B6 do I need? How do you answer that question for them? Because right? Those are the questions. They've got somebody who told them, you need this, you have this gene SNP, you need this, right?
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that to me. It's just, it's like somebody it's literally nowadays, it's worse than fingernails on chalkboard to me now, because it happens so many times that I've built this response. Right? My genes just fired. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Danger. So I respond. First of all, I try to not be a punk. And I was like, it's great that you have this information. It's useful that you have knowledge that you have MTHFR, polymorphisms and CBS and all that. That's great. But, that's just a tool. And we're not ready to utilize that tool yet to support your body. We'll come to that when we're ready. But first we have to lay out the foundation and decide where the ideal spots are to hit first. And you have to build a map, and then you do all the basics first, because there's no point to start at the very pinnacle and work down. I mean, nobody starts building the roof. You don't see people delivering shingles to your house on day one, right? It doesn't happen. So to me, vitamins are one of the last things that you add to the mix, and for many, many reasons. And that's how I respond to that. And yesterday, I was kind of a punk, and so I did a Facebook Live yesterday. So I have Facebook Lives every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on my Facebook page, so this woman, I do Q&A as well. And so this woman goes, I was just diagnosed with MTHFR H1298C. And what are the two best supplements to take? And I have some pretty fun folks on my page. I was like, are you joking? Are you playing with me? Are you serious? I mean, I think you're joking with me. And I was like, what's the answer to this? And so people are responding, there's more to it than that. And And so this lady, she goes, oh, sorry, I just got diagnosed with MTHFR. So I got diagnosed, right? Got diagnosed with MTHFR, and I'm just wondering what to do. And I felt really bad. And I was like, you're in the right spot. You know, it's great that you got this information, but, you know, you don't supplement your way through it. And it doesn't mean it's a problem. So we'll work through it. You'll learn. Grab a copy of Dirty Genes, and I'm more tactful in the book. So she came around, and she's actually, oh, you guys are so sweet and so supportive. So, thanks to my.
I think you did. I think and if people read the book, and they should all go read the book, you know, in what Ben was kind of talking about, if you're going to clean your car, you're not spot cleaning the car first. You're doing the big clean, right? And then you come back and then you do the detail stuff. Oh, I got a little piece.
Take the trash out.
Right?
Take the trash out.
Yeah, you got to do the big stuff first. And whether you have a hypothyroid symptoms, a hypothyroid condition, whether you have IBS or you have chronic fatigue, the core principles still don't change.
No, they don't.
Look at the things you can deal with first. Clean up your diet, your lifestyle first. These are all simple things that you can address. And Ben alluded to sleeping, and sleeping is critical, especially for the patients that are struggling with thyroid issues. I mean, if they aren't sleeping and breathing appropriately, and our good friend Mike Mutzel talks about nose taping and mouth taping and using, you know, breathe strips and breathing appropriately. And you had Andrew McGowan, I think, was on Patrick
McEwen. Yep.
Summit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you're mouth breathing and creating hypoxia all night, you're not going to sleep well. You're not going to rest well. You're putting yourself in a chronic stress response. You're increasing hypoxia to brain, and that immediately is going to increase your deiodinase 3 and convert your T3 or your T4 to reverse T3, and your T3 can get deactivated to T2. So you can have normal thyroid gland function. You can have normal plasma or serum T4, T3. But if you're spending just one little piece, and that's the sleep piece, and not sleeping well or not breathing well at night, you totally deactivate your thyroid hormone at the cells. So in Ben's book, I mean, he gets to these foundational things that you have to do, and it doesn't change what your health condition is. If you're not feeling up to optimal, all of these can help everybody improve their health and well-being, regardless if you have the Super 7 genes or SNPs or not. It's all about healthy lifestyle, correct?
Yes, it is. And, you know, and the Super 7 genes too, they do predispose us to having either responding differently to the environment. So, you know, the soak and scrub, you know, the basic general cleanup does apply to all. And then when you take the quiz and you find out, well, yeah, I'm a slightly slower COMT and slightly slower MAO-A. So, you know, you do tell me to fall asleep, but no, frankly, I'm trying. I can't fall asleep. And so, you know, you might have these genes and they're born dirty, possibly, meaning that you have these genes where they're not working very quickly. Okay, and there's benefits to them. I don't talk about, you know, the genes that are born dirty also have benefits, and they're not all bad. So if you're trying to fall asleep, then you might have these genes not clearing out your stress neurotransmitters out fast enough, or the histamine out fast enough. So I show you how to do that so you can actually fall asleep. So it's not just, I'm not sitting there telling you to fall asleep and you're like, dude, I'm trying. Help me fall asleep.
Yeah, I think it's key that you say that it predisposes you to having more issues, but it's not a death sentence, because a lot of people will come to me and they just were diagnosed with MTHFR and they think it's the end of the world, and they want to cling to that diagnosis per se, and a lot of them don't realize that there's a lot of things that you can do to overcome that, and it doesn't have to negatively affect you. And, you know, getting back to the foundation of, you know, things in our environment, this is the analogy I use with a lot of my patients, is that your house is on fire. You can't rebuild it while it's still on fire. You have to put that fire out. And that's a lot of the environmental stuff. And then you can use some of the genetic stuff, the higher stuff to really rebuild the house at that point. But living in our society with people who want things very quickly, you know, what would you say the top things that people can do to help kind of clean up their genes would be?
Oh, that's a great one. And, you said something there, and I should have written it down because it was really good. But I forgot. So I would say that the top three, well, actually, if let me say this, it has something to do with this topic. You know not to sit in the garage with the car running, right? You know that's not practical, okay? So, but what people are looking for is they're looking for, how can I sit in the garage with the car running? What do I need to do to be able to do that? So seriously, that's what they're doing. It's like, I'm leading a lifestyle that is not healthy at all. And what supplement do I take to fix all of that? And so they think, oh, well, if I get an oxygen tank and I put it in my passenger seat and I suck down some oxygen, I can actually sit in the car with it running in the garage. Well, turn the car off and open the garage door or get out, So the number one thing is avoid, hands down. So at drbenlynch.com, I have this great chapter that I could not include in the book because my publisher says you have 80,000 words. Well, I think we finished at 83,000. This would have put it at 88,000. She's like, no, we're not going to 88. No, it'll drive the price up and so on. It'll be too big. So she goes, you can use it as a bonus chapter. So this bonus chapter is exactly what you're talking about, Erica. And it's the ABCs of clean genes. And every recommendation is a letter, and it's very simple. A is avoid. And I have a long paragraph for every letter as to why I'm describing these things. So avoidance is key. So the book Essentialism, which Eric knows very well and got lost because he wasn't focusing. And I'll never let you down, bud. Never.
Yeah, thanks.
And but at least you're listening to a podcast and educating yourself.
That's right.
But that's still the point, though, is you have to, when you're working on something or you're supporting you're trying to concentrate, do that. And the number one thing for your genes is really to avoid excess stuff for them to do. Reduce their workload. You reduce their workload, they perform better, just like you do, and we all do. I mean, if you're sitting there and someone is just piling more work, TPS reports on your desk, like in that movie, right? And you just keep getting more TPS reports, it's going to make you bonkers. Right. So if people are doing that to you, tell them to stop and stop saying yes to everything. Start stepping up, and it's hard at first, but this is really important, is say no. Say, no, I'd love to help you, but I can't really, if your boss keeps piling you up stuff on top of you because you're the go-to person in the office, and just at one point just say, you know what, I'm the go-to person because I get stuff done, and I'm starting to feel right now that my productivity is shooting, so I'm going to have to say no to this one. And they'll kind of do this to you, and it'll be hard for you to say that, but they'll be fine with it, and this weight will lift off of you. The stress will reduce, and so much will be better. B is breathe. C is chew. Okay? Chew your food. Breathe. I mean, are you breathing right now? Or are you holding your breath? Seriously. There's something called email apnea where people are holding their breath. And it's such a real problem. I'm sitting, Eric is sitting. Eric, you're standing, so it's easier for you to breathe versus Eric and I. But so those are the basics. And so I would say avoid, breathe, and chew your food are pretty key.
Awesome. Well, I got like 50 more questions, but we try and keep the podcast to about 45 minutes to an hour. And so I'm going to sneak in one more question, and then we'll wrap it up, and we want to respect your time. We'll just get you back on in the future, talk about more stuff. But because people look at genetics as gene SNPs as a problem, right? You don't hear too many people go, yes, I've got MTHFR. How awesome, right? It's like the commercial where the people are banging their head against the wall or sitting in gum or walking into the.
That's my favorite commercial. I love that commercial.
And so, can you give an example, and maybe you pick one, but where a gene polymorphism could be beneficial, right? Maybe it's COMT, maybe it's how would something like a COMT SNP where somebody might go, oh my gosh, I got that. Can you explain why, hey, in certain situations, that is awesome to have that?
Yeah, for sure. And let's do COMT because people love personality stuff. And so, you get your genetic test back and let me hold this thing up real quick, so you get your test back and you see red and you immediately think, oh my God, that's bad. How do I fix that? Tell me what I need to take to fix that. It's like, this is like acid reflux on your genetic report. You want to fix it with an antacid, right? I mean, literally, you have a gene and now they want to know what to take to fix that. That's not how it works. But that's how we're trained. That's how the medical model has built our thinking. And it's no one's fault. It's that you hear it all the time on TV. So, and the radio and the news and the magazines, it's everywhere. And your doctor. So for COMT, there's a few different ways that you can be born with this gene. And COMT's job is to help you process estrogen, is to help you process dopamine and norepinephrine. Okay, so it helps you clear those out. Now, if it's working slowly, you can have higher levels of estrogen, you can have higher levels of dopamine and higher levels of norepinephrine. You're like, well, I don't want high, that's bad. Well, no, if they're higher, you're driven. You're a driven person, man or woman. You're going to get your stuff done. You're going to be super focused, and you're not going to be getting depression. I mean, I shouldn't say that'll be harder for you to be depressed because your dopamine's up, because that's the neurotransmitter that is the feel-good neurotransmitter that everybody's seeking for. And what all the research is doing, the rats hitting the heroin or the cocaine button that goes right to their brain, which releases a bunch of dopamine, and they'll keep doing it until they die. So people are seeking that reward. And so that is a powerful thing. Your addictive behaviors, you're not have addictive personality. You're not really have to be on your phone constantly. You don't have to play video games constantly. You don't have to shop all the time. You don't smoke heavily or drink or do drugs all the time. So you don't have these types of behaviors. But so that's the benefits. Okay. The flip side to that is you have a propensity to burn yourself out, and you have a propensity to be an irritable SOB when someone pushes you the wrong way and you fly off the handle, or PMS can really happen to you, certain times of the month, right? So a certain time of the month. And so that is not like a joke, and it's not something that is normal, right? So you can modulate how that gene is working for you actually by your choices. And so if you're type A and driven and you're getting your stuff done, but you find that you're having difficulty falling asleep and you have PMS, you notch it down a little bit. You just notch it down a little bit. You adjust the protein in your diet. You take some time out for yourself. You say no to some things, and you recognize the fact that you have this driven personality and you need to check yourself. So yours truly, I'm a pretty driven person, and I have to check myself because I'm passionate about what I do, and you have to rein yourself back. So that's one of the benefits of these things, but benefits can always turn into problems, right, Eric? And Erica, I mean, water can kill you, air can kill you.
So there's benefits to having, if somebody has a wild type COMT, they're the person who may be less motivated, needs a lot more stimulation to get stuff done. That's the kind of you may think of as the slacker, and they have the normal one or the wild type.
Right.
You have the person who's got a compound homozygous, they may have a slower clearance of those things. So they may be the person that's driven. If you put the same stress load on both people, it may get the slacker motivated to finally get something done. They couldn't get anything done, but they're going on vacation tomorrow. And that level of stress may finally kick their motivation in to get stuff done. But that same level of stress may take that person who's COMT, push them over the edge, be overly anxious. Is that a kind of fair summary of what you
Yeah,
just
it's a super fair summary. So, for example, I have a theory. It'd be interesting to do research on this. But, if someone has a slower COMT, they're driven to get stuff done, but they don't like emergency situations. They wouldn't be good at first responders, and they wouldn't be good at high pressure things like brain surgery or heart transplants, or first responders on a scene of an accident, because it's stressful, and that stress is going to cause them issues. And then also you have people who do really well with their homework and in day-to-day class or office work, but you put them in front of an audience to present, or you put a test in front of them, they get anxious, and now they can't perform anymore. So it's all about finding your strengths and weaknesses, and Dirty Genes helps you identify kind of why you're built this way. And it's however you're built is great. Just know what kind of car you're driving. If you're a Ferrari, stop four-wheel driving it, stop trying to drive it through mud. It's not going to work well. So that's the beautiful thing. When you know your genetics and how they're functioning, you know how to best properly drive your body throughout life and adapt it so it performs the best.
So I want to touch, because we talked about the book, we're talking about genetics. I want to touch on one more thing, because you held up that piece of paper, and that is something called the Strategene report. So if people want to get they want to find out more than they learn in Dirty Genes, they can get their genetics, and there's lots of potential genetic reports out in the market. You've got one that I use on a regular basis when I have somebody come in. But can you explain a little bit, and I promise this will be the last thing we bring up, what you developed a Strategene. What is Strategene? Why did you come up with it? Why do you think that is maybe more beneficial than some of the other things that are out on the market?
Yeah. Erica, do you use Strategene?
I do, yes.
Yeah. So I will put you on the spot to answer that question. So why would you use Strategene over other reports?
Well, I like that it's simple. It's not 100 million pages like some of the other ones out there. It has the relevant genes, because patients will come to me and they have printed out their 100 pages of genetic report, and they get scared by all of them, thinking that every single gene is really relevant. And I think you simplify it to the point where it's the ones that are most relevant. Plus you have the information with the pathways to really connect everything together, which I think is really, really key, is to see the big picture. It's not just one little element. You want to be looking at everything as a big picture and a whole to really be able to manage a person's overall health. Yeah,
it's for sure. And when I first learned about MTHFR doing some research, and I ran into that thing, I got down the rabbit hole, and I was like, wow, this is really important. And I started thinking, well, the fix was methylfolate, and some people got better, some got worse, and some no change. And then I realized that it was connected to this other gene called MTR, and that was connected to, MAT1A. And I started drawing and connecting them out, and I was like, oh, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought. And then as I was reading about MTR, because that's what your MTHFR connects to. Your MTHFR makes methylfolate, which supports this MTR gene. And it's like, oh, okay, what vitamin does that use? Well, that uses zinc and methylcobalamin. Oh, so that's what methyl trapping is. I was all excited. So I'll give methylfolate and methylcobalamin and a little bit of zinc to these people who aren't responding well. And some got better, some got worse, and some no change. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I was reading some more research papers on methionine synthase, this MTR gene. I was like, oh, heavy metals slow it down. Oh, yeast overgrowth makes this gene dirty, or alcohol makes it dirty, or nitrous oxide, which is used as laughing gas in clinics, dirties it up and makes it stop working. And I was like, oh, so it's not just about the genes and the vitamins, it's about things in the environment too. So when you get Strategene, you get these maps of all these connection points. And basically, as I was researching, I would read all these research papers, and I would add one little thing to my drawing. And I would add another thing and add another thing. So strategene is basically a culmination of, I don't even know, hundreds, thousands of research papers, and everything is cited too. So that's what was really cool, is because it was a tool that I developed for me to understand so I can teach, folks like, you and others. And then I realized, like, wow, we should actually turn this into a tool for practice. And so that's how it was born.
And I think one of the things that's really important too is that when you look at some of the other reporting devices, they do have a lot more gene SNPs on there, but when they provide advice, what you get, you don't kind of see the big context. What you get is, if you have this gene SNP, you take this. Then you go down 3 or 4 gene SNPs and it says, if you have this gene SNP, don't take that. And it's the same thing they told you 3 higher to take. So up here, you're supposed to take extra B6. Down here, you're not supposed to take B6. So somebody didn't really take a step back and see how all these things relate. So that's why I think I use the strategene as my primary reporting system. And if you're working, if the listeners are looking to get beyond dirty genes and they want to get their genetics done, obviously there's a couple places where you can get your raw data from, and then you can go to a provider that uses strategene, or you can go to Dr. Lynch's site. You can get I think you can order your own strategene report now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can.
And you can get that strategene report. The thing I try and tell most people when they get that is, don't go look at what the cofactors are first. And I tell doctors the same thing. What you want to do is you want to look at all those things and be aware of what the colors, the green, the red, the yellow, and Dr. Lynch explains that in the report. But one of the first things that I do with those reports is I look at the maps, and then I start knowing what I know about the patient. I can start crossing, okay, this is a problem. I look at all the things that slow that gene down or that may stimulate it, that are bacteria, stress, all those things, and just highlight all those things. And then you can see why a gene doesn't work regardless of the SNP. You got 3 or 4 things impacting this gene that you know that you have going on. Before you give a cofactor, you got to address these other things. And I think it just makes it a very nice, easy, efficient tool for us in functional medicine to use. And even for some of the patients that are now on the strategene Facebook page, where they can learn all about this stuff, they're becoming really educated. They're doing a lot of homework on their own, and they're starting to really get the big picture of how to utilize genetic reports, not just as okay, I'm going to need 30 supplements and vitamins to take, to, hey, I got to clean up this stuff first, kind of that soak, scrub, and then get to that fine detail stuff. But
that's right.
Yeah, in my exam room, I have your the big pathway planner, and I draw all over that thing, showing patients, okay, this is not working. This is all the stuff we have to work on. And when patients see that on paper and they see the big picture, it makes a lot of sense to them that this is more than just you taking a supplement, that there's bigger things that we got to work on.
That's right. You want to take the fastest road to get from, to Seattle to Philly, but you're going down there and they're doing construction right away at the end of your street. So there's a detour, and then, your car is a bit struggling, and there's a lack of a gas station on the way. So there's impediments from point A to point B in our bodies. And you have to remove the roadblocks first. If you don't, thinking that you can push through it, well, you can try, but it's going to wreck your car.
Yeah. And we see that whether it's the genetics, or we see that with thyroid physiology, where docs just think they can put more and more T4 into a system, and it's not going to create a problem. More is not a problem. They don't understand the physiology enough to understand that thyroid hormone just keep dumping more into the system just creates more stress, more damage to tissue, and leads to a lot of potential problems for patients. So let's wrap this thing up. Ben, if people want to get the book Dirty Genes, tell them where to go. Where can they find it?
Well, anywhere where books are sold, which is pretty cool. United States, it's published. It released just a week ago now, I think, and a little bit more than a week. And so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, but anywhere where there's books sold in bookstores, libraries also have them if you're not ready to buy it. But Amazon's got it for like sub $17 right now, which is amazing. It's also available in the Audible version, the audio version, and Kaleo Griffith is the narrator. And he's really good great voice. Like I bought it myself because I can't stand to read it again because I've read it already probably 20 or 30 times while editing. But I need to, remember what I wrote in there in terms of using examples and such. So I'm listening to Kaleo read it. So that's what I like about the Audible version. So yeah, that's where you grab it. And I have to say that, I was honored to see that we made the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list, and we made the USA Today bestsellers list and the Washington Post bestsellers list. So pretty cool.
That's awesome. Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think you did a fantastic job putting the book together. If anybody looks at this and they go, oh my gosh, genetics, I can't read that. This is not written for the level of somebody who deals with genetics every day. This is written for the average person to be able to read, to understand. If you're a functional medicine practitioner or any type of physician who's looking for a kind of simplistic way to start to look at the process, I think it matches that too. I think you've met a nice kind of balance between the type of people that could pick up this book and read it and go, oh, okay, I get it. Now I start to get it. So I think you did a fabulous job.
Yeah, thanks. The practitioners can definitely gain a lot of insight because they're playing whack-a-mole too, right? And they've been told at conferences and seminars that they need to be giving these supplements. So this book will help set them straight. And then the quizzes will help them guide their intake, right? So if they can start asking these quizzes and they start understanding, how their patient is responding to these, and they'll know how to support their patient. And then the spot cleaning is what supplements they can use after the soak and scrub is put in. And then there's a whole section on lab testing as well, what labs to use for which genes and why. And I tell you about certain markers, what you can expect and suspect. So that's a very useful resource as well for docs.
Excellent. And you're not currently treating patients. So people shouldn't reach out to you and say, hey, I need this, I need help. So if people want to learn more about Ben Lynch, where do they go?
They go to drbenlynch.com and you can learn more about me and my work there and other tons of free resources. And then we have a directory of practitioners as well that you can reach out to and get help. And both Erica and Eric are great to reach out to as well for support because they've been putting the work in and understanding this and how to utilize it the right way. So if you're wondering if these two are useful to work with, well, yes, they are.
Well, we appreciate that. And if somebody is a practitioner and they want to learn more about genetics and methylation and all the work that you've done in the background, where do they go? Do they go to Dr. Ben Lynch as well?
They do, and I would really, really invite them to read Dirty Genes. It's a fun read, and they will gain a lot out of it. And then once you do read Dirty Genes book and think about your own support, because if you are your own patient, you'll understand way better. So read Dirty Genes as a practitioner. Step one, apply it to yourself. And then you can, serve your patients even better or your clients even better for the health coaches out there. Now, in terms of further education, we have lots of conferences that are recorded and available. And, ShyCon 2015 is one of the courses that is very fundamental, but it gets down to a pretty deep scientific level. And that's a great place to start.
All right, great. Ben, we appreciate you being on. So it was fantastic. We probably could have talked for another hour. So we'll look forward maybe in about a few months and try and get you back and see where Dirty Genes has gone in that time frame. We can touch base on more of this stuff, but we really appreciate you being on. As always, Dr. Erica, it's good to do this podcast with you. And for the listeners, look forward to another podcast coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll have Dr. Erica and I'll be on talking about something on thyroid physiology to help you answer your questions about thyroid physiology. So again, Ben, thank you so much for coming on, and have a fantastic day out in Seattle. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Appreciate it, Erica.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, bye-bye.